Good afternoon and welcome to Spotlight Africa, coming to you live from Oyo, the capital city of Akwa Ibom State, Nigeria. My name is Uyai MM. Today on Spotlight Africa, Ivory Coast president set to announce whether he will seek a fourth term. Mali, Russia signed deal on nuclear energy during Goita's Moscow visit. Kenyan police officers charged over death of blogger in custody. United Nations warns of escalating humanitarian catastrophe in Sudan amid ongoing conflict. Plus, CAR officials issue statements claiming president is not seriously ill. These stories are all just ahead of Spotlight Africa. Stay with us. Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. First on Spotlight Africa. Speaking at a rally in Abidjan on Sunday, Ivory Coast President Al Hassan Ouattara said that in the coming days he will announce whether he will run for a fourth term in the country's 25th October election. His message to tens of thousands of supporters came a day after he was officially nominated as candidate by the ruling rally of Hypothetists for Democracy and Peaceful Party. The announcement followed Ouattara, who has led the Ivory Coast since 2011, is accused by his critics of tightening his grip on power. His supporters see him as a beacon of stability, having made his career as an economist for the International Monetary Fund before turning to politics. On Thursday, the two main opposition parties, the African People's Party of Ivory Coast and Democratic Party of Ivory Coast, launched a joint campaign to demand the reinstatement of their bad leaders. The PPACI is led by former President Laurent Gbagbo, while the PDCI, the country's largest opposition force, is headed by former international banker Tidjane Thiam. Both leaders were struck from electoral lists by the court, Gbagbo due to a criminal conviction and Thiam over a nationality issue. Ivory Coast has a history of election-related violence. In 2010, a dispute over Ouattara's victory led to about 3,000 deaths in clashes with Gbagbo's supporters. In another development, Mali and Russia signed agreements on Monday to bolster their economic and trade relations, including a cooperation deal on the peaceful use of nuclear energy. Mali's interim president Assimi Goïta met Russian President Vladimir Putin during a five-day official visit to Moscow beginning Sunday. The two leaders also signed an agreement on the creation of an intergovernmental Russia-Mali Commission for Trade, Economic, Scientific and Technical Cooperation. Goita's visit to Moscow comes shortly after Russian paramilitary group Wagner left Mali. Wagner had been deployed in the country since December 2021 and had been repeatedly accused of human rights abuses. It was replaced by the Africa Corps, an organization managed by the Russian government. Countries of the Alliance of Sahel states have increasingly turned to Russia for help to fight jihadist groups. Attacks against military facilities have intensified in Mali in recent weeks. The Al Qaeda linked jihadist group Jamaat Nasr al Islam, while Muslim killed dozens of soldiers in an attack on a military base this month. Moved down to Kenya, where three police officers were on Monday, June 23rd, charged with the murder of a 31-year-old blogger Albert Owang, whose death in police custody earlier this month triggered nationwide protest and renewed scrutiny of police brutality in the country. Owang was arrested after allegedly defaming Kenya's deputy police chief, Eliud Lagat, on social media. Lagat, who has denied any wrongdoing, stepped down temporarily last week to allow investigations continue. Alongside the three officers, Samson Kiprotik, Talam James Mokwana, and Pete Sakimani, three civilians are also facing charges. Authorities initially claimed Owang died from self inflicted injuries. However, post mortem later revealed evidence of assault, contradicting the police account and fueling public anger. Meanwhile, Kenya is on edge as the country prepares for the first anniversary of the June 2024 protests on Wednesday. Thousands gathered on the streets last year to protest the government's controversial finance bill and its heavy tax rises. Demonstrators stormed the parliament building in Nairobi on the 25th of June 2024, with police opening fire on the crowd. President William Ruto withdrew the bill the next day. Meanwhile, opposition leaders and youth groups have vowed to return to the streets in honor of those who died in the Gen Z led movement. According to rights group Civitas Monitor, over 60 people were killed and 82 forcibly or involuntarily disappeared over the course of the demonstrations. The victims' families that Wednesday's memorial rally would be secured. The United Nations has issued a grave warning about the deteriorating situation in Sudan, describing the conflict as a crisis of humanity with devastating consequences for millions of civilians. Now, according to the UN's independent international fact finding mission for Sudan, the use of heavy weaponry is in densely populated areas, I beg your pardon, has surged, leading to widespread death, displacement, and suffering. Aid agencies are struggling to respond, hampered by deliberate obstruction. The Red Cross reports that the conflict has forced over 11 million Sudanese from their homes, while tens of thousands have been killed or wounded. The crisis is compounded by continued arms smuggling into the country despite a UN imposed arms embargo. However, not all agree with the embargo. Sudanese military expert Mohi al-Din Mohammed argues that it threatens the state's ability to protect its people. 2 years into the brutal power struggle between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary rapid support forces, peace efforts remain elusive. Meanwhile, civilians continue to bear the brunt of the war, facing hunger, violence, and displacement with no end in sight. In a separate development, authorities in the Central African Republic on Monday issued a statement saying President Faustin Hashanga Dara was not seriously ill. Specialist website Africa Intelligence reported that he has been in Belgium since Saturday for emergency treatment. It said Caldera was in a stable condition in hospital in Brussels after having been evacuated from Bangui on a private medical jet. Opposition politician Martin Zigueli says the head of state health is a matter of national interest and has called for transparency. Officials, however, reassured the public that there was no cause for alarm and claims that Caldera simply took advantage of a scheduled trip to carry out a medical checkup. They said the aim of his visit to Brussels was to urge the European Union to support the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization, Gavi. South African engineers freed after 2 years in Equatorial Guinea jail. Second thanks for staying tuned, and now the concluding stories in Spotlight Africa. We move to Sierra Leone, where President Julius Maada Bio was chosen on Sunday TV, the next chairman of the West African Economic Bloc, ECOWAS. The Economic Community of West African States, known as ECOWAS, was founded in 1975 and is facing challenges due to rising violence, departures, and economic disturbances. In a statement following Sunday's announcement, Bayo promised to prioritize democracy, security, cooperation, economic integration, and institutional credibility. Bayo is currently serving his second term as president after a contested election 2 years ago in the coastal West African country. He was president when ECOWAS imposed severe sanctions on Niger following the coup 2 years ago. Niger cited the sanctions as one of the reasons for leaving the bloc. Sierra Leone was one of the countries that supported a military intervention in the country in 2023. At home, Bio is facing an ongoing synthetic drug crisis and a stagnating economy. Bio's new position comes as the decades, with jihadist forces controlling vast swaths of the Sahel, a semi arid region south of the Sahara. We move down to South Africa, where President Cyril Ramaphosa has expressed deep concern after the United States' entry into the Israel Iran war. His comments come after Washington joined Israel's bombing campaign of Iranian nuclear sites on Sunday. Ramaphosa urged the US, Israel, and Iran to give the United Nations the opportunity and space to find a peaceful resolution to the conflict. There has been mixed reaction from world leaders to the US attack. Some have condemned the strikes, while others expressed fears of a wider conflict, while noting the threat posed by Tehran's nuclear program. Recall that on Sunday, the UN Secretary held an exceptional emergency meeting called for by Iran to discuss the US strikes. UN Chief Antonio Guterres said he was gravely alarmed by Washington's use of force. He described the US bombing of Iranian nuclear facilities as a perilous turn in a region that is already reeling. Meanwhile, two South African engineers have returned home after spending more than 2 years in jail in Equatorial Guinea on what the UN has called arbitrary and illegal drug charges. Frick Protega and Peter Hugsam, both in their mid 50s, were arrested in February 2023 after drugs were allegedly found in their luggage. Reports say they were sentenced to 12 years in prison and fined $5 million, but have been given a presidential pardon after a long campaign for their families, by their families, I beg your pardon, and South African government. The arrest came days after luxury assets belonging to Equatorial Guinea's Vice President Todero Guema Obiang were seized in South Africa. A yacht and two Cape Town villas belonging to Obiang, who is also the son of Equatorial Guinea's president, were impounded in execution of a court ruling. Elsewhere, there have been celebrations at the border between Ethiopia and Eritrea as communities from the frontier villages come together for the first time in 5 years, separated by the close border since the outbreak of the 2020 conflict in Ethiopia's northern Tigray region and subsequent political tension. Sunday's coming together was a symbolic moment of peace and reconciliation. The reunion of families and friends took place in the Ethiopian town of Zalambesa in the presence of village elders and religious leaders. Reports say the move to reopen a section of the border was organized by local activists and community figures without the official backing of the authorities on either side. But those behind it indicated that they had the blessing from officials in Tigray and Eritrea. Many at the celebration described it as an emotional and long overdue gathering. For 5 years, relatives and friends whose communities straddled the international boundary had not been able to see each other across the militarized border. Many in Zalazambiza and the nearby villages had suffered economic hardship and social fragmentation during the 2 year war in Tigray that ended in November 2022. Lastly, today on Spotlight Africa, the first female and first African president of the International Olympic Committee, Christy Coventry, was inaugurated in the role on Monday. The organization's 131st birthday. Coventry, a two-time Olympic swimming gold medalist for Zimbabwe, formally takes office on Tuesday after decisively winning a seven-candidate election in March to succeed Thomas Bach. Bach, an Olympic champion in team fencing in 1976, leaves the role after the maximum term of 12 years in office. At the formal handover ceremony at IOC headquarters in the Swiss city of Lausanne on Monday, Coventry presented each with the Olympic Order in gold. Commentary thanked the more than 700 assembled guests, including IOC members, athletes, Olympic movement representatives, delegates from international organizations, political leaders, and IOC staff. The 41-year-old Conventry will lead the IOC through the next 8 years, including the 2028 Summer Games in Los Angeles. The ceremony took place on Olympic Day, which marks the founding of the modern version of the Games in 1894. And that's all we have for you on Spotlight Africa, bringing you news all around the continent. This has been put together by Spectrum Television. Do us follow on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel, all of which you can find at Spectrum TV Live.ng. Spectrum Spotlight Africa. My name is UIMM. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.